Welcome to another edition of Voice of the Diaspora. I'm your host, Norman Brown. The People's Progressive Party assumed office on the 2nd of August and have since embarked on a national witch hunt. We see many government and public service workers facing the axe. Today, in studio with me is veteran journalist and former CEO and executive chairman of NCN board, the NCN board, National Communication Network board, ENRICO WOOLFORD. ENRICO WOOLFORD is not a stranger to the media, as much he's not a stranger to politics in his media work. He joins me today to talk about allegations made by the People's Progressive Party of terminating his contract when they assumed office. The PPP would have released a statement saying that Mr. Woolford's contract was terminated on the 12th of August. But Mr. Woolford will speak to us today on that matter. Henry Woolford would be joining us in just a few. Enrico Woolford.
Hello, good morning.
Yes,
Good
welcome.
afternoon, rather.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Voice of the Diaspora. I'm getting a bit of technical difficulties here. Not a good start. Let me move this from the screen. So yes, welcome to Voice of the Diaspora. How are you feeling?
I am
You're
a little
live. You
better.
are live. If you can fix your camera in frame, okay. Move back a bit,
Okay,
and then
hold
you
on a
you are
second.
perfect there. You're perfect there. Just move back
You sure?
a little bit more. Head down. Perfect there. The world can see you there. Perfect. How are you
I'm getting
feeling?
a. I'm all right now. I got up with a splitting headache. I don't know why, but I think it's the fact that New York is a bit hot, so I get dehydrated, perhaps.
Yes, it's hot everywhere. Yes, it's hot everywhere. Let us go straight into the program. You have been over the past 2 years, approximately, the chairman of the board of NCN, and you were also the CEO of that organization, NCN. And recently, the PPP took office, and they would have embarked on a national witch hunt, I call it. And many people, many workers in the public service, I understand, and also those who they call political appointees were given termination letters. The minister within the office of the prime minister would have released a statement saying that you were one of those persons whose contract was terminated on the 12th of August. And they would have spoken about your remuneration and how extravagant it was and so on. Tell us what is happening.
Norman, one of the things with Guyana is that it is what I call it has always been BG. You know, back in the day, it was uh, British Guyana, Booker's Guyana, and then persons sometimes refer to it as Burnham Guyana. You know, now we have the it's not often beautiful Guyana; it's more bitter Guyana.
Yeah.
But here's the issue. And let me make this very, very clear. Although sometimes trying to clear up an issue in Guyana doesn't really matter because people go away with whatever perception they want.
Yes.
And unfortunately, sometimes our media gets caught up in the following the herd rather than trying to be heard. I have been chairman of NCN for about 2.5 years. The chairman of NCN, upon the chairman and the members of the board are appointed based on the recommendation of the government of Guyana, I understand through its cabinet, a recommendation, not a directive, um, to the shareholding company, NISL. This
Yes.
is the National Industrial and Commercial Investments Limited. That is the shareholding company. So NISL is the shareholder on behalf of the government of Guyana. NISL then meets, has an annual general meeting or an extraordinary general meeting, and
Yes.
appoints, ratifies the directors and so on. That is then placed for the record with the court, so that under the Company Act, all directors are registered. The financial institutions doing business will know that these are the directors, and you sign up the documents and what have you.
Yes.
All of that was done, as I like to tell people, decently and in order under the previous administration. As a result of the previous CEO separating from NCN in about 2018, I think it was the end of December 2017, but Mr. Cornett's leave went for 3 months thereafter. I was asked by the board to take command of NCN as the chief executive officer. Now,
Yes.
here is how that can happen. Under the Company Act, Section 18, I think, of the Company Act, a company can appoint any director to be its managing director, can appoint a managing director from within its ranks and make such appointments according to the law. That's how I became the chief executive officer, because the NCN did not do a search again for a
Okay.
chief executive officer. I'm not sure that the Company Act says anywhere that a minister can appoint a chief executive officer. What it says is that the directors from within their ranks can appoint anyone to be chief executive officer.
So, yeah.
The interesting thing, Norman, is that I worked. I did not collect the chief executive officer's salary, which is the same that Mr. Cornett was working for, that everybody is publicizing, which is the same Molly Hassan was working for, which everybody is
And
publicizing,
that was
which
under
is
the
the same
PPP,
that that probably
previous
Mr.
PPP
Fazil
government.
Star and Mr. Michael Gordon may have done.
Mhm.
Not one of those persons, not one of them, has the same qualifications and years of experience as I do. Persons in Guyana with the kind of qualifications that I do are very limited. And the kind of experience, I can call those with the kind of experience that I have, are people like Ron Robinson, Margaret Lawrence, Phyllis Jackson, Robin Diodat, and some of them have more experience in broadcasting than I, but I went to a school called the Syracuse University, the Newhouse School of Broadcasting. Several other people, you just got to Google it, broadcasters, sports writers who went to that school. I don't want to drop names in that regard. The Guyanese probably don't know.
Yes.
And they know, but they didn't realize that it's a very prestigious broadcast school. But I can tell you that the reason I went is because broadcasters before me went to a seminar there, and performed creditably well there. Now, I did not take a salary until Mr. Cornett's leave had been completed, just on principle.
Yes.
I was not going to work. I was signing documents as acting chief executive officer and so on, but I was not going to work and double dip, so to speak. Mr. Cornett was continuing to collect. What sense does it make based on the position that NCN had, financial position, that
Yes.
I was also going to collect money? So I served there for, the contract was deliberately written to end with the election cycle
Yeah.
for 2 years. So everybody knew that elections are supposed to be held within 4 or 5 years. So the contract was due to end after that time, before that time
Time.
rather,
Yeah.
came. When we went into the no confidence motion, and we went into the election cycle,
Yeah.
the board collectively, Norman, decided that, look, we don't want to tie, and it's in our minutes, we don't want to tie the hand of any incoming administration. So what we will do is, once the contracts have come to an end, we will only operate on month-to-month contracts and leave if the new administration do not decide that they want this board, they do not decide that they want the anybody as a CEO and so on. So
Yes.
in effect, at the end of July 31st, we had all left. But being somebody who has a commitment to Guyana and process, a company must be headed by somebody. It must have a legal structure and so on. So we were signatories to the account, at least 3 of the directors, and of course the finance manager. We could just get up and leave the situation the way it was. I, however, left the country on July 28th. Sanctions or no sanctions, I left the country because I had a medical emergency to deal with, not with myself, but with somebody very close to me. And on the 2nd of August, as everybody knows, the transition took place. The government changed. I think by the next day, the Monday or the Tuesday, I got a call from Mr. Kwame McCoy. He had not yet been appointed in the office in which
Of the
he
Prime
had been
Minister.
appointed as minister. But I told him that, look, Kwame, I'm not in Guyana. He didn't realize that. I'm not in Guyana. We expected this transition. We have put this in place. All of the things that I told you, we have put to ensure that we will not be there after the end of the month, which was July. And you can deal with our corporate secretary, you can deal with our executive assistant, and you can also deal with the executive director that we left there to ensure the transition takes place. But as Guyanese would have it, we have to make political mileage out of something. I did not speak again to Mr. McCoy. And I haven't spoken to Mr. McCoy until now, up to now. But then later on, I found that somebody revealed how much my salary was and the fact that my services were terminated. As another director, Gordon Mosley, who was
Yeah,
on our board, made it very clear. How could you terminate something that doesn't exist? How could
precisely.
you say that somebody was sent off of a job that they weren't on to begin with? other than other than the fact that that was their last public job. What is the purpose of doing it? Other than political mileage,
Manage.
other than making sure that you try to pillory somebody in the public, other than making sure that you appease your supporters. But the place you're talking from, I think, is the United Kingdom, and
Yes,
we're dealing with uh, with Guyanese in the diaspora, and of course, the United Kingdom is part of that. You had a prime minister; he had issues too, but Winston Churchill once told Neville Chamberlain with regard to a certain leader, dictator arising in Germany, that if you think that if you feed the crocodile thinking the crocodile will eat you last, he will eat you first.
first.
And sometimes going along the way thinking that you can appease your supporters and tell them, well, this one was rotten and this body was bad, and so on, that your supporters may not one day turn against you. Um, that unfortunately has happened in history. And let me add to this.
Go ahead.
Let me say this. I have lived a little while on this earth, thank God. And in the early 1960s, when I was a kid, the very PPP administration did the same thing to my father. He was a member of the Rice Marketing Board, an employee there. And in 1993, when the PPP administration came to power again, I was working with the Guyana government at the time. They did the same thing to me. And in 2020, they have made up another story about me. I hold no bitterness
Yeah,
against the PPP. But I understand their track record. I understand how they operate. I think the idea is to paint you black and
yeah.
paint you in a corner. And by black, I mean metaphorically.
Metaphorically.
Um, Put you in a corner and pigeonhole you as to who they think you support, rather than looking at your record and what you can do, and how you can serve Guyana. And I think it's very, very unfortunate, as somebody said to me from another sector last evening,
Yes.
um, that it's unfortunate that we go through this um, this catharsis every 5 years, depending on who wins and who loses.
It is sad, it is unfortunate, and it is something that as a nation we will have to address with a view of correcting it. And I hope that the younger generation who are listening would be strong and different in their approach and fair and equal. You have, in the execution of your professional duties, and I don't think anyone could, looking at your track record, anyone could accuse you of ever really being partisan or lopsided in your journalism. While you were out there and even while you were behind the desk, many people would say that Enrico Woolford maintains a very high professionalism. That is what I have heard when I've researched you and so on. I It was brought to my attention that during the elections you would have in executing of your professional duty, you would have asked Mr. Jagdio a few questions that would have caused him to become very angry and would have, to some extent, issued a veiled threat to you when you said he was challenging an election that was reminiscent of an election in the past that made him president. Would you like to elaborate on that, if you can recall that moment?
Norman, I recall that moment very well, but I don't think it it was an interview that I had intended to make public in the way it became public.
Yeah.
But the idea was there was confusion at GCOM. NCN had been contracted by GCOM to provide technical support services. In
Yes.
most societies, national broadcasters are called on in the United Kingdom. The BBC is called on if there are things like the Olympics and so on. In the United States, you have private big networks who do that in Canada, CBC, and so on. You provide a service. You're not doing it because of some political reason. We were providing a service to
Service.
GCOM so that you can have press conferences, and the national broadcaster will then send it out to everybody, and you would then have like a pool operation and so on. That's what we were doing.
Yes.
So we were following the election too, and that is the newsroom, which operates largely independent and separate from NCN. We have to provide it with financial support and logistical support and so on. But I dare any editor in chief, any senior editor, for them to come and say they were directed to carry this story or that story or the other story. What may have happened from time to time, because I've been a journalist for over 30 years
Yes.
and in Guyana, if I saw a story or if I thought that a story was interesting, I may suggest to a journalist, look, we should, or the editor-in-chief, we should follow this particular story. There may be a story out there.
Yes.
There are story angles and so on, but never directing that. Don't carry Mr. Jagdio. Don't carry Mr. Granger. Don't carry Miss Amna Ali. Don't carry Gail Teixeira. That was never done. And I think I've recorded most of the discussions that I've had at NCN, and I don't think anyone can come and say that we did that. So the newsroom was outside of GCOM. The NCN technical team providing the technical service to GCOM was inside. We heard the combustion, like everybody else, when the PPP refused to allow the returning officer to make his declaration. However they think of the declaration, however persons felt about the declaration, that was probably the reason that led to it. I then asked Mr. Jagdio, because I saw him discussing what was happening with the Carter Center and the Commonwealth, some of the other observers. And I've been a Commonwealth observer, so I happen to know how observers operate. And after he had finished talking with Jason Carter and Jason Calder, I asked him what was the issue about, and he said, "Well, you see what's happening. I think he said, among other people, for some reason, probably because of the way I look, everybody from the PBP would put you into a camp, and this is part of the rigging exercise and so on." To my mind, it followed that if an REO has to make a declaration, then a declaration is made. If you don't like the declaration,
There's a process.
There's a process that you go by way of an election petition. So he was explaining, no. I said, but that's exactly what happened in 1997, and that's what paved the way for you becoming president. He said, no, back then we won the election. The interesting thing about winning elections, particularly in countries, is nobody goes back and check. Nobody goes back to check, Norman, after somebody's declared the winner, whether these votes were validly cast and so
Gotcha.
on. It is left up to the observers, it is left up to the system for them to say that, look, this looked free, fair, credible, transparent, and so on. But it's like money in a vault. It's locked away in the vault. The ballots are locked away in the vault. Nobody actually goes back, opens the vault, and double checks that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and therefore, an election petition allows for that to happen, but
Happen.
it takes years, so nobody wants to go that route. So, for some reason, later on, a recount was held, and everybody knows the end of that story.
Yes.
But knowing, I don't think it just stemmed from the interview with Mr. Jagdeo. I think it is how Guyanese perceive each other. It depends on how people think that you talk. It
Mm-hmm.
depends upon how people think that you behave. It depends upon how people believe um, uh, believe what they think you believe, not necessarily what has actually happened. And I'm going to give you two examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
The High Commissioner for Canada, whom I asked to do an interview on a program that I developed called Context. Um, that High Commissioner was able to make some statements and so on within Guyana
Mm-hmm.
that jurisdictionally I thought were a little outside of her remit. I also have a master's in international relations. I happen to know a couple of things.
Yes.
And I then said, well, High Commissioner Chatterjee, through my production executive, who is Miss Wendy Hermanstein, she arranged all the people coming on Context and so on. And various people were allowed to come on from time to time. The High Commissioner came on, and I think the interview went off the rails for a little while because I thought that the High Commissioner ought not to have described in Guyana any kind of uh, what you call it, any kind of action seeking redress
Mm-hmm.
in the court as frivolous for two reasons. One, this particular High Commissioner pushes minority issues, the disability, LGBT, women and gender issues, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, if a woman voter, decides, well, look, I want to find out what is it that this recount will do, you have to let the legal process take its
Of
course.
course.
And by describing it as frivolous and what have you, she was, in fact, not only describing the action, but what the court had done. Um, so I asked her whether she wanted to revisit that. I asked her a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
and clearly, on the interview itself, she did not want to apologize or pull it back and what have you. Do you know that some of the comments that I saw, Norman,
Mm-hmm.
the, um, looked at the ethnic origin of the High Commissioner as against where people felt my ethnic origin is. And therefore, I was attacking this woman because she appeared to be of East Indian descent and so on. You know,
So there was an insinuation to race.
yes, as if I was just I were asking her because of race. I was asking her because I know Miss Lillian Chatterjee is a proponent of minority issues,
Jews.
and therefore, if anybody else, if Ganesh from the Blind Society had said, "Well, look, we want to find out about this recount because uh, we are blind and the operations cannot be verified the way we want them to be verified." Are you going to describe that as frivolous because they're a small group? Um, uh, at Syracuse University, I've always been taught that democracy is a majority of minority interests,
Yes.
and therefore all the persons who have an interest in the development of the society, those whose interests conflict will win, not based on ethnicity. But in Guyana, it matters not whether genetics has been kind to you and you've come down on a certain side of the mutation line, as the late historian Bobby Moore used to say. People will pigeonhole you
Yes.
and will decide that, look, you are speaking from a racial point of view, you are behaving from an ethnic point of view, and what have you. And unfortunately, our media sometimes would get trapped in that um, in that vortex, and follow the rabbit down the hole. And I think many times you have to pull yourself back, as they taught us in journalism school, not be in the car, come out of the car, look and see how fast the vehicle is going, because at times we do not realize that we are caught up in the action and in the vortex. I did two other interviews with the High Commissioner for the United Kingdom, and the focus went on the Northern Ireland Agreement, and the fact
Yes.
that religion played uh, a decisive role in Northern Ireland. I'd been to Ireland in 1980 when I was studying in the United Kingdom, and I'd seen some of the issues that Greg Quinn was raising. I spoke with the U.S. ambassador and what have you, and the interview went in a certain direction because of the position the United States took, and she made it very clear that it was not interference, and that was an opinion that the United States was propagating at the time. And then everybody knows the United States describes its position in sometimes ambiguous in sometimes an ambiguous manner. For example, they spoke about sanctions and, and visa restrictions, and then you will know when you get on the plane and when you
Yes.
arrive. That's not how the Code of Federal Regulations and the Foreign Affairs Manual that govern how consular services should operate. The United States, with all its wards, is a country governed by laws. And the law clearly says in Section 9 of the Foreign Affairs Manual that once a visa is revoked or cancelled, you have to inform, you shall inform the individual of what has happened, even if it is done at the level of the Secretary of State. But again, our media, our people sometimes do not follow a story, try to unearth the story and really find out what is happening. And getting back to
Yes.
the one with the Canadian emissary, the Canadian High Commissioner. After the interview, the Canadian High Commissioner stayed on the line and said, "Enrico, you were pushing me. I really did not want to become the headline." Clearly,
Okay.
she did not want to apologize, although she felt probably that she ought to.
Chiato.
But
Yeah.
that would have made the headline the next day. And if you keep a certain line, you probably would not become the headline. The good thing about societies now, Norman, is that
Yes.
almost everything is recorded. So even if you say, "Oh, I didn't say that," somebody's going to unearth a copy of the tape that was done on the protocol, the platform on which it was done by NCN, and say, "Well, look, this is what you actually said." So therein lies the problem. But again, some of the supporters of the People's Progressive Party described, or some other people too, described the interview as having racial overtones.
Overturns.
I was speaking to the Indian heritage Miss Chatterjee in a certain way, and I was speaking to the Caucasian heritage Greg Quinn and Sarah Lynch from the United States in another way. How do we know people's heritage? My great grandmother from my mother's side came from India in 1896. How do we know what people's heritage is? Um, and therein lies the problem of of our society until such time as we have constitution reform that will solve some of these issues. We are going to go through this cycle every
Over and
5 or 10
again.
years over and over again. And therefore, we have to speak to our young people to ensure that the young people understand, Norman,
Yes.
that look, we have to work on the Constitution. We have various ethnic origins, people of different ethnic strains and origins in the society. And we have to make sure that all the people of Guyana, and I mean all the people, not the platitudinous all, where a politician gets up and says, "We are going to work for all the people of Guyana, so we can throw a fit for one group, and we are going to give enormous economic assistance to another."
Another.
And that the economic assistance is skewed in favor of persons who look like the persons in power. Unfortunately, I think the democratic system is predicated based on race and based on divisions within a society.
Society.
And we have seen that over the years. You name me one democratic society where there is not a, a connection in either look or history with the leaders in power and the population, the majority or the powerful population within the society. It is as simple as that. And we have to reform the Constitution to ensure that every person gets a bite,
Yes.
so to speak,
Yes.
of
The,
the national
the
good.
redistributing of the wealth must be equitable. I couldn't let you go without asking your opinion on this situation that had emerged shortly before the elections campaign, during the elections campaign, and even now. When we look at the news media, when we look at the news media in Guyana, we saw a shift. Many would have said that to me. We saw a shift in favor of the then opposition, which is the government now. So many believe that there were unfair pressure by the media in Guyana, media that were over time quite balanced and objective and fair, that there was a sudden shift against the coalition and in favor of the PPP in opposition. And even now, as the PPP continues its national witch hunt, that these media houses like the Kaichor News, Stabrook News, and some television stations and so on are standing unapologetically and unashamedly by peddling mistruths, like your situation when you would have not renewed your contract and you would have left and all of that, that the minister within the office of the prime minister would come out and gave a release to newsroom to say, and to the Stabrook News and Kaitro News, to say that your contract was terminated, as if you were in office sitting down there and had a ongoing contract, and they kicked you out. And these media houses are not saying anything. My question is, what is the future? For now, and over the next 5 years, if we're going into a full election term, um, what do you think is the future of journalism? How do you think that the opposition and the society that's not bowed to the government, how do you think that they would be presented to the society in terms of the media reportage and so on?
Norman, I think it's important, and I'm very glad you asked me that, because I think it's important that we go back to what I remember Miss Fowler, Mr. Rokiam, and Miss Boswick, and all my teachers in primary school and lessons teachers and so on
Mm-hmm.
encourage us to do, and that is engage in reading and comprehension. Journalists must know, must be informed before they seek to inform. They must know before they let things known.
Yes.
As a result, journalists, therefore, must realize that they should not follow the herd. They should not decide that because somebody has said this is what it is. They must question everything. Let us take a simple example of the ministers sending out directives that they can fire certain people. From where do they gain this authority? And what is the authority vested in them saying, look, under Article 118 of the Constitution, Section 1,
Mm-hmm.
uh, the cabinet holds the authority to appoint or not appoint boards and so on. Nobody does that anymore. The things just happen, and people accept it because a minister says so. I remember one time a journalist working with me came and said the minister said that minibus fares should not go up. I said, under what authority? Where is the minister vested with this authority? The minister can offer an opinion, but and what has happened over the years is that whoever is leading the narrative,
Yeah.
um, the journalists, rather than trying to comprehend and understand the same word, what is happening in the society, decides to follow the story as the story is being put out there. As I said, you're in the United Kingdom, I'm in the United States.
Yes.
I've watched television in Canada. I've traveled to more than 11 countries in Europe, observing the media. I've been to South Africa and other places in the world, including the South Pacific. And guess what happens? If you have a publicist that decides that this is how the narrative shall go, that is how it shall go. Until somebody in the media decides, oh, wait a minute, why are we all reporting on Mr. Bolton's book? Because Mr. Bolton's book is being pushed by the PR and the publicists behind there. So often that you find out why this story all of a sudden comes out, and you find out the reason it comes out is because a congressman or a senator has a bill that
Yes.
they want to introduce. And many times, look at what happened with Mr. Lammy in the United Kingdom.
David Lammy.
Many times, David Lammy's version of events only occurred because somebody was able to put it on YouTube and to put it
Yes.
on social media. So social media plays a role, but not a wide enough role in informing the public, because it can also be manipulated. It
Native.
can also be done, and push narratives in a way
Yeah.
that gets people to think in a certain manner. You know, the funny thing is, when persons were tagging me and sending information, look, your salary was 4,000 US dollars, and they didn't say whether it's after tax or before tax, and you got these benefits and what have you, and the algorithms within Facebook started to send me comparisons of news anchors, journalists who were earning money. Is then I really realized persons like Robin Givens, and so on. No, Robin Roberts, rather. Sorry,
Yeah.
from ABC, is earning $44 million a year,
Yeah.
or $35 million a year. Um, I don't go around, and they sent me a whole list of news anchors and journalists who are earning an enormous amount of money. And they're earning enormous amount of money for my friends in the media because they are bringing so many eyeballs
Yeah.
to the company for which they work, or they have the experience and the competence as I have, to ensure that persons use the media that they have. It is interesting. Let me say this, and I've been talking a while. It is interesting that immediately the same PPP government
Yes.
that did not, you can ask Ms. Hermanstein if you don't believe me, that did not want to come on during the David Granger government on NCN, so that NCN would appear as if they are not reporting
Thing.
the opposition side at the time.
Okay. Okay.
Immediately upon the change of government, I saw very nice minister, very nice person, Priya Manik Chan on NCN. I saw again Anil Nandalal, extremely good lawyer. I speak with Anil every now and then. Now the former Attorney General, now the Attorney General again. On NCN, I see Indar Deodat, I think his name is, who did some splendid work for the Theatre Guild on NCN. Why? Because NCN, under my direction and the direction of the previous administration, expanded its radio and television facilities so that you can get coverage in Aishalton, you can get coverage in Lethem, you can get coverage in Anai, and well, Anai was there from before, but we beefed that up. Oriala, you can get coverage in Madhya, you can get coverage in Bartica, you can get coverage along the Essequibo coast. And we are working in areas like Matthews Ridge and the north,
Yes.
and part of the northwest. You have coverage across the coast. There is a television station that carries NCN's signal, an NCN station to the quarantine area. And as I said, there's a radio station. Oriale is on the border with Suriname.
Yeah.
So I used to say, as chairman and CEO of NCN, only the forest covers Guyana better than NCN. And we also want
Oh,
and we also want to ensure that there is a proper online coverage. So we changed out our satellite provider. So our satellite provider previous we had a very low elevation on the horizon, in that if there were mountains ahead of you, it became a little difficult, and there were issues with that satellite provider. And I think there's a lawsuit as a result of that, which probably will become another big story as to
sorry.
why we moved from one person to the other. But we wanted to cover Guyana better than the forest.
Yeah,
And therefore, our satellite should look straight up and get and distribute signals in a proper manner.
in a proper
And
manner.
it is because we expanded that. It is because we have gained that credibility that the very people who will condemn you one day will turn around and appear on your program the next day.
Yeah,
So that is the nature of politics. That's the nature of how you try to sell a situation and your ideas and your commitment in Guyana. And again, I say to you, Norman, I think it is unfortunate.
yeah.
Rather, most societies, again, I refer to the fact that you're in the United
The
Kingdom,
kingdom. Yeah,
most societies build on what has happened.
yeah.
What we do is we try to destroy, we try to ensure that the other side that was there before, they must look bad so that we must look good.
Yeah.
Um, there's some part in the Bible that says about exalting yourself, and I'm afraid that sometimes politicians exalt themselves, but he who feeds the crocodile, thinking the crocodile will eat you last, the crocodile
And we
will eat
eat you
you
first.
first.
Well, we are wrapping up now, Enrico. We did say we were going to go for an hour. We've got like about 3 minutes left. So I want to offer you the opportunity over the those 3 minutes to say what next for Enrico Wilford, and what do you see? What do you see happening to the opposition coalition in terms of media coverage and so on? So what next for as we face this kind of shutout by the traditional media entities and services? And do you believe also that this witch hunting by the People's Progressive Party administration will extend to taking away people's radio license and so on and so on? 3 minutes and we will say goodbye.
I hope the PPP understands that there is a part of Guyana, a large part of Guyana, or more than half in some instances, that do not necessarily believe what they believe. And you saw that at all elections over the thing. And they've got to take into account that there's a large part of the country that will remain dissatisfied. Various uh, persons have spoken to these issues. There is a group calling itself the Guyana Renewal Project that seeks to ensure that we operate more on the Article 13 that speaks to the inclusionary part of Guyana, of the Constitution. So they've got to learn to include everyone. Any party that gets into office must learn to include people. As for myself, I will continue to do what I do. I like doing what I'm doing. As a journalist, I like to operate and make sure I read and I ask questions and I understand the issues in terms of the future of Guyana.
Yeah.
I really believe in culture and the arts and science and technology. And I think we have got to ensure that we put the infrastructure in place that will encourage Guyana to become a giant in the world of culture, in the world of sport, in the world of the other world of arts and technology
Okay.
and science, and those are things that people will remember. I even think a Guyanese cuisine is fabulous, and therefore we have to sell that. Nobody goes to a country and remembers where the oil rigs were. Nobody goes to a country and remembers, oh, I was able to cross this bridge or that bridge. They go to a country and they remember a good place they ate, uh, um, a place that they saw a very good show, the wonderful attitude and the warmth of people. They remember its natural beauty and its spectacular sights and so on. They barely remember. There's the Marriott that was a nice hotel. They don't remember that. They remember what the country is.
Yes.
And and I'm hoping that we use our resources to grow and develop the arts, to grow and develop culture, to grow and develop sport. Lennox Allen appeared in a boxing match last week. And of course, he promoted Guyana. Jazzy Jack sang, and people are pleased about that. And we always attach um, to people who share our same heritage, share our same culture, and share who we are as a people. And I'm hoping that a better Guyana can evolve from the bitter Guyana that we sometimes see. We'll always be BG, beautiful Guyana, Norman. It might be brown Guyana, you never know, depending if
Well,
you.
let me tell you a little secret as we come to an end. This has been a dream come true for me, and I've done a lot of interviews with a lot of people, international sports personality. I've done with ministers of government and so on and so on. And I had to try to hold it here, the nervousness, sitting with someone who is a veteran journalist, someone who has been around for a long time, the days of GBC, that would have walked with Pancho Carew and all these greats, Margaret Lawrence and these great people that when I was running around in beer bucked as we call it, and I'm listening to the radio, I'm thinking, oh my God. And your name was right up there with them. And so when I reached out to give this interview, I said to a friend, I said, listen, I don't know. I think my tongue would be tied. I don't know what is gonna happen. I said, this is big. And I want to say to you that regardless of what those who have gone into office with that view of putting great people down, professional people down, and so on. We want them to know that we will lift them up. And I want to say thank you. It has been a privilege and a pleasure to have you on this program. And this is historic in itself. And I want you to know that you will be welcome back at any time to discuss any matter or to contribute to the website, KTP, Voice of the Diaspora, and to this program, Voice of the Diaspora. I want to say thank you once again, Enrico Woolford, and do have a splendid evening.
Thank you for allowing me to appear.
Take care and good night.
Good night.
That was Enrico Woolford here clarifying the public statements made by the government of Guyana, the new government of Guyana, in terms of making it appears as if they walked into his office and sacked him. And this is the attitude of this present administration that sat down with the Americans, that sat down with the Canadians, that sat down with CARICOM, that sat down with the British High Commissioner and promised that they would, if they were given power, they would be fair, they would serve all of Guyana. This is what we're seeing. Not only a national witch hunt, but where they cannot get at people that they feel they should get at, they're creating stories. It is a shame and it is a disgrace that the minister within the office of the prime minister would make such statements in public knowing that those statements are untrue. It is disingenuous. It is disingenuous. And it's a shame that the prime minister himself would sit by quietly and allow these things to happen. It is sad. It is a sad day for Guyana. Enrico Woolford, one of Guyana's long-standing journalists, one of Guyana's best journalists, was here with us. And until our next program, which is in about a hour's time, take care and have a good evening.